Hey, it's Jay. I wanted to extend a special thanks to those of you who have listened and left reviews on iTunes for this podcast. Please leave a review if you haven't done so already. We sincerely appreciate it. We're producing this show independently, and unfortunately, that is not free. We have to pay for digital hosting space, software, equipment, websites, and travel out of our own pockets. But we'd love to keep this show going as long as possible. Pledge your support by visiting www.bigbuckregistry.com/pledge. Thanks for your support and enjoy the show. Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, fueled by Advanced Takedown Tree Stands, episode number 188. Jason Obermiller and Eric Fitzgerald. What am I deer missing? Deer biology, agronomy, and rackology. Please support our sponsors as they make this show possible. Today's show is sponsored by Advanced Takedown Tree Stands and Morse's Sporting Goods. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
Hi, this is Barry Wenzel from Brothers of the Bow and Trophy Whitetail Boot Camps. I'm not really sure what a podcast is, but you're about to push play on what is now my favorite podcast, Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
This is Dr. Dave Samuel, and you're about to push play on one of the most informative Big Buck podcasts out there, Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast.
This is Laura Zara from Naked and Afraid, and you're about to listen to my favorite podcast, Big Buck Registry.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Jay, and Dusty and I are hanging out here in the podcast studios as we do each and every week. And Dusty's over there looking at me and say, hey, you know, I can see the look in his eyes. He's saying we got a long show, so let's get through this intro fairly quickly. What's going on, Dusty?
Man, just been real busy and slowed it down a little bit and getting on the podcast here. And just hanging out in the studio, talking with you, Jay.
Cool, man. It's we get a riveting show this week. A couple of fellas out of Nebraska, Jason Obermiller and Eric Fitzgerald from Rackology, and it's packed loaded with all kinds of scientific information that is going to blow your mind about how much thought can go into a supplement and how much thought can go into designing the earth around you with the proper nutrition to grow things. So there'll probably be a lot of things you have questions about, so feel free to shoot us an email or join us on Facebook, and in the notes below the post, definitely leave your questions there, because we're going to get back together with Jason and Eric for round 2 to answer more of these questions. And I think despite the length of this show and despite how much information is here, I feel like we're just touching the surface completely.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I think that we get some questions in, and you know, I take my backing, really dig into what they have to offer. And I know that, you know, as far as science background for you, Jay, is there's more to dig into with both Jason and Eric, and I look forward to future shows with them.
We're still running the harness program. We're out of harnesses. All of them have been spoken for. All of them have been shipped out. We need more. So if you could, please shoot me an email, jay@bigbuckregistry.com, and let me know if you have some harnesses. And once we have some more, we'll get some more out to anybody that needs them.
Jay, let's get to Jim Keller with the deer news.
For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the deer news. Our first story this week, Maryland approves airbow for deer during firearms season. The story was originally featured on the deeranddeerhunting.com website and was reported by Keith Barnett. The Maryland Department of Natural Resources has confirmed that the Benjamin Pioneer airbow has been approved for use in the firearms season for whitetail and Sitka deer. Maryland joins a growing list of states allowing for the use of the airbow during their hunting seasons. Arizona, Missouri, Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Washington State allow big game animals to legally be taken with the airbow. Feral hogs can be taken in Georgia, Florida, and Texas, while coyotes and other predators may be hunted with the airbow in over 30 states. Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina also allow the airbow to be used for alligator hunting. The Pioneer Airbow is an all-new category of big game weapon featuring full-length arrows and full-weight broadheads, all driven by air. Hunters interested in learning more about the airbow can go to www.benjaminairbows.com or by visiting your local Cabela store to try the airbow in person in their shooting range. Cherokee man offers reward for information on poaching case. This story was originally featured on the Siouxland Matters website and was reported by Christina Grijalva. In Cherokee, Iowa, a reward is being offered to solve a nasty poaching case in northwest Iowa. Someone used a power tool to decapitate a trophy buck in Cherokee during Iowa's January deer hunting season. Adam Timmerman of Cherokee is putting up a $5,000 reward in hopes of catching the poacher. Anyone with information can call the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. The number for the Turn in the Poacher hotline is 1-800-532-2020. 16 individuals cited in violation of statewide shed hunting ban. This story was originally featured on the OutdoorHub.com website. If you're tempted to break Utah's shed hunting ban, you're going to want to read this first. The Division of Wildlife Resources Conservation Officers have put this ban at the top of their priority list. Since the statewide ban was issued, officers have reportedly spent more than 500 hours watching game areas where big game animals hang around during the winter. According to a recent tweet, the Utah DWR has cited 16 people in violation of the closure. DWR Captain Mitch Lane says several of the individuals were cited for illegal take of protected wildlife. Obviously, in this case, antlers and horns were the subject under scrutiny. Our officers cited these individuals after watching them look for and then pick up antlers, Lane said, or we caught them with antlers in their possession. The bottom line, officers are out there on the mountains watching for people to violate the rule. If you find yourself in one of these areas officials are watching, chances are you'll be met by a conservation officer. Unlawful take of protected wildlife is a Class B misdemeanor. Violators will face fines as high as $1,000. The statewide ban is set to last until April 1st. Federal judge overturns scentlock decision. This story was originally featured on the deeranddeerhunting.com website and was reported by Keith Barnett. Scent Blocker has successfully overturned the original jury award in the case Scentlock brought against it in 2014, claiming false advertising. The case took an abrupt turn on January 30, 2017, when United States District Court Judge Gordon J. Quist issued the court's opinion granting Scent Blocker's motion for judgment as a matter of law and vacating the original jury's find of liability in the case. In the opinion, the court states, Scentlock argues this case essentially involved a bait and switch regarding the sale of Scent Blocker's Trinity products. According to the court, these arguments fail. The opinion went on to state, noticeably absent from the case was any testimony or evidence from the retailers. Scentlock presented no survey evidence, nor did any witness from Cabela's, Gander Mountain, or Dick's Sporting Goods testify that they were deceived. The order further noted ALS witnesses, that is, Scentlock witnesses, were competent to testify about declining sales, but they provided no insight into the retailers' purchasing decisions. In addition, the court agreed with Scent Blocker that ALS had not proven that Trinity effectiveness messaging harmed ALS's sales. The court declined to impose any financial damages against Scent Blocker. To sustain such an award, there must be some proof that plaintiff lost sales or profits, or that defendant gained them because of the purported false advertising. ALS proved neither. In addition, motions by ALS for enhanced damages, attorney's fees, and prejudgment interest were also rejected by the court. According to Scott Schultz, president and CEO of Robinson Outdoor Products, we're pleased with the opinion of the court and have already put this chapter behind us. This lawsuit proved to be an incredible waste of our company's as well as our employees' valuable time and resources. The opinion confirms what we knew all along about the impact our Trinity scent control technology messaging had when it came to illegally harming Scentlock sales. It didn't. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry's Deer News. For links to the stories featured this week, please check our show notes at www.bigbuckregistry.com. If you have any ideas for future topics or have any questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Without further ado, here is Jason Obermiller and Eric Fitzgerald from Rackology. Jason and Eric, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you, my friends?
Good, thank you.
Doing great.
Nice.
Glad to be here.
You have this logo that has a double helix. It's pretty darn cool. If you know anything about DNA in general, this kind of pops out. I'm an old science guy, so like something's good is going on here. So I'm interested to break that all down. But tell me about yourself, Jason, and where you're from, where you grew up, and where you call home today.
Well, I grew up around Loop City, Nebraska, and kind of moved around a little bit, but never did stray too far from home. And in fact, this back where I'm teaching high school science is back at my alma mater, so to speak. So
Nice.
Didn't stray too far.
What was life like growing up as far as your studies, school, friends, hunting, that kind of stuff?
Well, I abused hunting a lot, I guess I could say. My mom was always on me about, I still hung out with my friends, but if I had my choice of hanging out or going hunting, I was usually in a tree stand or calling coyotes or doing something. I lived and breathed hunting. That probably caused me more problems at home than, getting in trouble than what most kids got in trouble for.
Gotcha. Eventually you ended up in college and you got a master's in biology. What prompted you to do that?
Well, I kind of a long story short, I just didn't really know. At first, I really didn't know what the heck I wanted to do, like a lot of kids out of college did, because I actually dropped out the first time, fresh out of college or out of high school, went to college for a couple of years and dropped out because I just did not know. I really didn't have my direction straight, and one thing led to another. I became a professional taxidermist, and that was going awesome, but I still didn't feel like I was really completed, and kind of maybe a little midlife crisis, so to speak. And my wife's like, well, why don't you be a teacher? And my first comment was, I think you're crazy because I don't like kids. And she goes, go back to, you want to be a biologist. She goes, do that, but then teach. And if you decide that teaching's not for you, then go get lost in the woods and just be a biologist. And so I did that and, taught for a number of years before I went on for my master's. And, during my master's, that's when I did my main thesis part on antler growth in deer, particularly focusing on pedicle measurements and to see if there's any significance in 1.5-year-old deer, 2.5, 3.5 on older, as far as aging them and health and so forth. And then I kind of, on my own, adjunct that with just overall deer herd health. And so,
Okay, gotcha.
That's kind of that.
And we want to expand upon that down the road here in just a sec and learn more about what you studied as part of your thesis and want to know what you studied about deer nutrition. Eric, tell us about yourself. Where are you from and where do you call home? And tell us what you do for a living.
Well, I guess a lot like Jason, I was born and raised in Kearney, which is hop, skipping, and jump south of here, about 45 minutes south of where Loop City's at, where we call home now. But grew up just outside of Kearney. My direct family, my parents never farmed, but we were actually every summer out on my uncle's farm north of town and spent a lot of time out there, and got me really interested in agriculture. And that's when I went to graduated high school in Kearney, went to the University of Nebraska, and I knew when I got back, all my cousins were older, and the kind of the family farm was going to be pretty much, they were going to handle all that, and I tried to figure out how I would fit into something like that. And 2 years before I graduated from the university, I shadowed an agronomist, and like a lot of people, I knew my uncle used agronomy consultants before, and I just didn't know exactly what they did. I just thought they were crazy being out in 100-degree weather. Walking cornfields when they were 7 foot tall. The corn was 7 foot tall, no wind, no nothing. And when I shadowed that guy for a summer, I just fell in love with agronomy, and I knew that's what I wanted to do, and continued on and got my MBA. And then I went on and got my certified crop advisory, my certified crop agronomist designation, and I've been doing agronomy work ever since. So I shadowed that agronomist in 1997, and I can't believe it's been that long, 20 years already, but I've been walking fields for 20 years and love it. Born and raised hunting and fishing. My dad loved to fish. He also loved to hunt, but I did a lot of upland game hunting and stuff. But one of my best friend, my best man at my wedding, is the one that got me into bow hunting. And I kind of give him the designation of getting me really into deer hunting. Before that, I just went with my dad, my grandpa. We went rifle hunting for a weekend and thought that's all it was. And when he got me into bow hunting when I was in high school, it really taught me a lot of what all goes into it. And back then we didn't have the fancy bows. We didn't have, it was a tough sport. And that's my love of deer and deer hunting all kind of goes back to that. So.
Gotcha. When did you first hear the word agronomist or agronomy?
Well, I always call the guys out in the field. They're just kind of crazy guys out there. I thought they just told my uncle what to do and what not to do. And I was probably a junior in high school when I really found out what an agronomist did and what they do. So, and I guess kind of going back to it, it sounds kind of bad, but we were goose hunting, me and that same friend down south of Kearney, and we had probably 10 bucks between us, and we drug out all the decoys we could. We even made silhouettes because we didn't have any money. We made silhouettes and went out to this public place and got out to where we really wanted to be, set up our decoys, our makeshift decoys, and got ready to hunt. And lo and behold, a guy just right down the lagoons started throwing his whole spread out. And I ain't kidding, he had a trailer full of Bigfoot decoys when they first came out, and decoy after decoy after decoy. And so he looked at us and we looked at him, and he says, well, we might as well hunt together, and increase the odds instead of having two different decoy setups out here. So we did, and we got talking to him. And he had a brand new pickup, brand new trailer, and I didn't have the gall to ask him, but finally my buddy says, looks like you kind of got some, what the heck do you do for a living? He goes, well, I'm an agronomist. And I said, really? And I said, I've heard about agronomy. He goes, yep. All I do is I bust my butt in the summertime, and I love to hunt. And so in the wintertime, I soil sample and I hunt all the time. And that's what stuck with me, saying maybe that's the direction I need to go because I have the same aspirations. So actually, that's probably the first time I really dawned on me that might be an avenue I could pursue and still live the hunting lifestyle.
Gotcha. It's a fascinating study. It's a fascinating topic, and that there's even a profession that you can get into for doing this kind of stuff is right up our alley, and I want to explore a lot of that. Jason, let's get back to you for a second. I want to learn a little bit more about your thesis and what you came up with, how you came about deciding to study that, and what it was all about.
When I was visiting with my professor and his assistants, kind of deciding on what direction I was wanting to go, I just told him pretty much, my natural love for is hunting and really is deer. And I said, I'd like to do something with deer studies, because when I was doing my understudies, anytime we had a biology study we had to do for a class, I pretty much went to doing something with deer. I've done everything from deer attractant studies, deer scent studies, estrus versus other things. That's all I really enjoyed doing. And so, my professor was like, well, then go for it. And what do we want to focus on? And I said, well, I think let's look at something with antler growth. And he had an idea that he thought could be used someday even by the game and parks, which from what I understand, they were interested in our study. I'm not sure if or when they're going to start using it, but it sounded last time I talked to them that they were, really looking at using the information we found to use at deer check stations for getting a very accurate age on 1.5 and 2.5-year-old bucks, primarily because that's what they're really looking for, is whether they're younger or mature past 3.5. So decided to go with pedicle growth or pedicle measurements on shed antlers. One thing we had to verify was that they still had the skin ring when we found the shed, so that we knew it was this year's, because if you leave it out in nature for too long, obviously you're going to have some shrinkage and may not have as accurate of a measurement as we wanted. So we collected shed upon shed from various locations. We kept them all separate so that we could see if there's any relation between up here on the middle loop, down there on the Platte, a couple other places that were collected on. And, ultimately our information drove us to noticing that there was a huge confidence interval as far as, pedicle diameter in relation to 1.5-year-old bucks, that pretty much cemented that in, that they could definitely say, yeah, this is definitely a 1.5-year-old deer at a check station. Anybody could do it. You wouldn't have to have a biologist there, just somebody with a caliper that could measure that base, that pedicle.
Okay.
And then it kind of eliminate, slitting up the side of the jaw, like, they've done, still today in pretty much everywhere because they really haven't got this study involved totally yet. But
Right.
so went that direction with it, with the shed pedicle. And then, like I said before, I kind of adjunct off that, being as I was already, neck deep in the data. I started looking at, deer nutrition and health along with it.
Okay. Gotcha. What else did you find through your thesis? And when do you think they'll start using this information in the field instead of the jaw?
Well, we're hoping, in the next year or two. My professor is the one that actually talked with the Game and Parks. I think I kind of felt like they was going to take his word more for what we did than, just talking with me. He was a doctorate, so I think they took him a little more serious. They're really interested in that, and whether or not they move forward with it, that's when it kind of gets into the political realm that I don't really deal with much. So right. I'm not 100% sure when they're going to. I just know they expressed interest in it, when he had talked to them. What could you determine as without being a biologist? What were you able to determine from the measurement studies? You could measure the pedicle of a deer, on the back of somebody's pickup or something, and be able to tell what, if they were a 1.5-year-old, which was very accurate. 2.5-year-old, we were still in the high, like 70 to 80% confidence interval, which is in science, that's a big number. Right. 3.5, it was starting to get a little bit iffy into the 40s and 50 percentile, and and beyond that, genetics really takes over after 3.5, and so that's when it becomes very difficult to determine age of a buck, based off its antlers, and we didn't really necessarily care about that in the older deer. We were really looking at the younger deer. And, going with that shed pedicle base measurement is kind of where I really got the idea of, what's this have to do with nutrition? What are some of the underlying facts? I mean, you can go a lot of different ways in these studies, but that's kind of the direction that, that we went. Very fascinating. Let's definitely want to get back to some of your expanded nutrition studies that you entered into, and I can see how you transitioned out of it. Like you could determine a 1-year-old or 1.5-year-old, 2.5-year-old, up to the 3.5-year-old, and then after that it was genetics. But that must have just set off your scientist in you as to, well, there's more to this puzzle, and what else is it? And it sounds like that was the trigger point. I don't know if I'm right or not, but that's kind of sounding like that's what it was. Yeah, because when you're going through literally hundreds of research documents and research articles and research journals, you really start seeing a pattern. It took a long time, a lot of research to start to see those patterns, but once they started showing up, it was, a lot of things started becoming a lot more clear. I want to get into some of Eric's agronomist work, and I want to turn it over to Dusty.
What is an agronomist? Tell us about what your basic title meaning is, so that people understand a little bit more about what you do in the field.
I guess basically it's to take soil dynamics and what actually and take those what might need to be added fertilizer or carryover fertilizer, and take that knowledge and to our best ability for our customers, which are growers around the area, farmers and growers, and maximize their yield. So they basically maximize their dollar, what they're putting in into the soil and hard work to turn around and be their eyes and ears out in the field, whether it be insects, disease problems, irrigation issues, water issues, soil chemistry issues, whatever it might be. We try to take that and maximize their dollar, which in turn makes them happy and continues to hire us as an agronomist to be their eyes and ears out in the field. And, it's always, we pride ourselves in helping guys out every year do that. And as we know, since the late 60s, farming has ramped up in fertility and what needs to be done to raise better yields every year, whether it be corn, soybeans, alfalfa, cotton, whatever it might be. That we're like Jason, that when you start doing a lot of research, whether it be in the university or there's started to be a trend on this is making sense. This is where our levels need to be in soil nutrition to make sure that translates to yield and translates to dollars for that guy. And so that's I guess kind of in a nutshell what I consider an agronomist. It's we're out there every day making sure everything goes right for that guy. So.
Right, for sure. So I'm gonna go into this as I'm the hunter. Let's say I purchase 60 acres. Let's go with 35 acres tillable. Mm-hmm. What's the first step I need to take to figure out what's going on with my tillable soil?
Number one, I tell everybody is taking soil samples and making sure you're doing them right. Most of the nutrients is going to be, depending on where you're at in Nebraska, you got down in the deltas and southeast United States. It's going to be different than the floodplains and the Great Plains where I'm located here, the western part of the Great Plains. So you got to deal with topsoil. Topsoil could be 4 foot deep. It could be like we're around here, we're only about 8 inches deep topsoil. And that's basically the breakdown of the parent material, and that's where all your goodies are. That's where all your good fertility is. So the deeper the topsoil you have, the better fertility you might have. So I start with, okay, where are you located? And back in the 60s, they did do the soil survey maps, which classified each soil. So if you have 35 acres tillable, the first thing, and the awesome thing about this day and age is the computer age, you can get on and get Google Earth or wherever you might be. You can see some nice aerial imagery, but you could also, with the software, I've got software that will take that 35 acre patch and tell me exactly what soil type is in that field. And so what I've done for guys with plots is I'll do that preliminary work first. I'll look at the soil types. I'll know where they're at, kind of what their topsoil depth is. Tell them, okay, you need to take 12-inch cores, which with a soil probe, you probe 12 inches into your topsoil. And you do that on a 35 acres, you might want to take 2 samples. So each sample consists of 12 cores. So what I do is I split that field either in half or the 2 different soil types, whatever it may be, and direct that guy to, okay, this is, and I could send him an image that could, or I could send him GPS coordinates, and they can go out there and go right to where I want them to take samples. Take the 12-inch samples, throw them in a soil sample bag, and we send them off to the lab.
When you say a soil sample bag, do you put all your samples into one bag on each side of the farm, or do you separate them?
What I do is on the 12-inch cores, you can get about 10 of them into one of our soil, and I like using all the soil. I see guys fill a bucket up and use a fourth of what they collected, and knowing and being there's, when you get into agronomy, there's a lot of different. There's soil scientists, there's soil chemists, there's plant nutritionists, there's botanists, there's entomologists that deal with insects, and what agronomy is kind of trying to compile all those together. And so when you do that, well, I saw people that were taking the whole buckets and only using a fourth of it and throwing the rest of the way, or throw it back on the ground. And I'm a firm believer in, you take 12 good soil cores, put the whole thing into a bag, because that gives you a true representation of what's there. And what I do is about 10 cores fit into a soil sample bag. So there'll be 2 soil sample bags on a 35 acre plot if there's 2 different soil types. Now, if that 35 acres was pretty much uniform, I would tell the guy just to take 12 cores around the whole field.
Gotcha. So let's scale that down just a little bit tighter. So let's go. Most people have a 3 to 5 acre plot. How many cores on that?
Yep. And I would say most of the guys that are doing the plots are an acre or less. And what we try to recommend is instead of doing one huge plot, do 2 or 3 little half-acre plots.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. So once we get a soil sample, we get it packaged up and we send it off. What happens once it gets to where it's going to get broke down for what we need coming back?
I've kind of paired myself and my agronomy business with there's a lot of labs out there, and there's a lot of them are really respected. I've actually got a lab that I used to work for when I was doing my MBA, and in the winter I'd actually worked for a lab doing their phosphorus tests and doing their grinding and anything they needed me to do to make some money to pay for that. And so I learned a lot about what goes on in the lab. But and they were always good to me. And when I started my business, I started going to them with all my results, and so that's where I take them. And they're nice. It's close enough that I could just drive them down there, or you can mail them. And so we get them off to that respected lab, and it usually takes about 4 days to a week to get the results back. But in there, you need to let them know what you're looking for. They've got 2 pages full of what test you want. And in this area, in most areas, we do a complete soil analysis. And what that does is it breaks up any macro, micronutrient that a plant might need, and gives us a part per million reading of where we're setting in the soil prior to any fertilizer going out there or anything happening. So, anywhere from November to about now, February, March, is when we like to take the soil sample in this area because there's no green foliage growing. So it gives you a true representation of what's in that soil. We get that back, and then we try to find out what the guy wants, and we do a fertilizer recommendation based off of that.
So once you get your soil sample back, you do a fertilizer recommendation. Kind of explain that what that process is. When you analyze the results, what are you telling them to do from that point?
Well, whether you're growing row crop with like corn or soybeans, or you're growing a perennial alfalfa or clover, everything, we call it crop removal. The plant for the whole growing season will pull nutrients out of the soil to survive and to produce yield. And so we base everything off of crop removal or yield. And one neat thing that I know every soil is so dynamic. There's more living organisms underneath the soil surface than there is above the soil surface. It's hard to imagine that, but the microorganisms in there are so important. And what I like to tell everybody is we think of soil as just a stagnant thing. It's dirt. It's, there's nothing, you got to treat it like a living, breathing machine down there, because if you don't treat it that way, I have seen fields and parts of fields just actually go backwards really fast and not produce very much. But we get those. So when I explain to the people that this is where we need to be on soil fertility, we get a baseline, okay, where we're at from the soil test, where we want to be, and we make up the difference with an applied fertilizer. And one neat thing is with our fertilizer product, it not only addresses the fertility that we need, but it addresses the microbial activity we need, the humates, and some of the micronutrients that people miss a lot. And we have it formulated in a way that it's chelated, and it's also very absorbable into the plants. And so what we try to do is we try to fill that gap of what the soil sample says to what we want to produce, and we fill that gap with our fertilizer on the different rates, whether it be pounds an acre to 50 pounds an acre.
Gotcha. Can you break down the money value that having your soil tested versus not? Is there any figure pops in your mind, or a percentage of what you're losing or gaining?
Oh, it is so important. And I can't stress it enough. Take one soil sample might cost you $20 to take that sample. And what you could save and what you have out there, it's invaluable. You might get to a spot where you pick a plot, you think it's going to do all right. It's got some pasture or annual grasses. It's never been tore up before, or a field that has been tore up before. You will always save the money that you spend on a soil sample with what you might not need to put out there that you think you do, but you get the soil sample back, you could save money that way, or you actually could, make your plot that much more efficient, and by putting more that you might have missed with not taking that soil sample. And it's crucial. I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer anymore. You have a half-acre plot, pull a sample, and it tells you everything that soil needs.
That's a beautiful thing when you know what your soil needs to produce the maximum tonnage for your herd.
If you're throwing too much stuff out there, and you're basically throwing dollar bills on the ground. I see if your soil sample come back and it just looks like a book to me, because I read their amounts and it could just read the history of that field, of what has happened there in the past. And just a quick little story about around this area, there's a lot of hog operations, and they used to spread all the hog manure in different areas. And so we were taking soil tests, and we couldn't figure out why the phosphorus levels were so high. We sat down with the map of the guy that farmed it. His grandfather came in. His grandson didn't even know they raised hogs there. And we couldn't figure it out. And his grandfather, without missing a beat, he said 5 words the whole conversation. He says, that's where we used to raise hogs. And I said, and if we wouldn't have known that, we couldn't explain that soil sample, why it was doing that. So it's neat to see that history and open that book up and know what that soil is capable of.
That's quite amazing what the dirt will tell you, ain't it?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's something that's super interesting about what you do. Now, let me get into a lot of times that you be somewhere, say you're at a show and you're talking to a seed rep from whatever Joe Blow seed company, and they're telling you the pH. If your pH is not right, you've got nothing. You kind of explain what the pH is and how it all works.
pH is kind of your gas gauge of what your soil can and can't do. You like to have pH around 6.4 to 7. Most soils around here will be within 5.5 to 8, and pH is definitely the first thing that I look at, and it's one thing that you can't fix very easily, but there's some things you could do to help the soil to either increase or decrease your pH. When I tell people I'd rather have a plot that's above 6.4 than a plot that's below 6.4 in a way. The more acidic you get, the more low pH you get, the harder things are to fix. And so what I consider is you can get 90 to 100% of your yield, no matter if you're going out over tonnage or yield or plant health, between 6.4 and 6.8. If you get above that, you're dropping down to 80% efficiency. And you get above that, above 8.4, then you're getting down to about 60% efficiency. When you go the other way, it drops off really fast. If you get below 5.5, you get down to 50 to 60% efficiency right away. So pH is the first thing when I get a soil sample back that I look at. And I guess because that really tells me what the soils can do between the CEC, which is the cation exchange capacity, and the pH and the organic matter. Those three things are nutrients. Those are soil amendments that tell you what your soil can do. So those are the first things. When I get that report back, those are the first three things I look at, because I could tell somebody if they've got a tough soil. It's hard to tell somebody they got a crappy soil, but you have to.
Gotcha. Absolutely. There's no doubt about it that spending that money for a soil sample definitely ups your odds of having better luck and success with your food plots. Now, when they're talking about pH, and that's something that you can work on that yourself, and obviously somebody that deals with soil a lot knows the answer. But pH can be adjusted by lime applications.
Exactly. Yep.
And there's a lot of small things that anybody, just to put it out there, that anybody can work on an acre patch with a walk-behind spreader and some work and some labor. Having somebody that's able to read your soil sample, and that's where Eric would come into play, being around the soil and what he does for a living. Definitely contact professional help when it comes to, anybody can pull a soil sample, anybody can send it off. But if you can't read it, there's no value in sending it.
Yeah, it's if you can't read that language, it definitely doesn't make sense, and it takes quite a few years of really knowing the correlations between them. But whether you could tell a guy, you got a local person that's got cow manure, go get a pickup box full of it and go spread it, on that field. Or if you don't have that, here's what you need for fertilizer. And like you said, liming is an excellent way of raising that pH. And it's fun getting, and I hate the most complex soils and the toughest ones that come in are the ones I like the most, because those are the guys you could help the most.
So, Jason, let's get back to your studies that you had. You went through your thesis. You came up with some theories on how to age deer, and through your studies, while you were studying that, it sounded like you got into some other questions that you had about true nutrition for deer herds. And I'd like to see where you went after your thesis was kind of wrapped up, and what other things started to unravel in your head.
A lot of these studies and journals and all this information that I was cataloging and searching through, not only, when you're talking about pedicle size and antler growth and everything, so much of this stuff it always shot back to, nutrition and genetics and, everything that makes a wild animal, particularly a deer, the healthiest it can be to maximize its genetic potential. And so my interest was, what are my deer missing? Because, in some places you can go a few miles down the road and, and Eric can vouch for this, you got a totally different soil sample. And, So some areas are decent in nutrients, and the deer are getting, most of what they may need out of nature. And then there's, a lot of areas where, they're not, and they're lacking. And sometimes you can actually even see that in the antlers as far as their growth, how heavy they feel, how solid and dense they feel, and so forth. And one of the other legs of this was I started kind of going into the nutrition part. And, I wanted to know, okay, there's umpteen products on the market. We all know that. And I want to know what deer need, first of all. And that was one of the major portions of it. And then as I was studying it, when I got done with my research and began looking at my, at my data, and kind of knew, okay, it gets really complex also, not to go on a side note, but certain minerals will not be absorbed properly without another mineral.
Okay.
Likewise, you can have those two minerals in the proper ratio, and if another mineral is not present, it still won't be absorbed properly. Or of certain vitamin, there's a number of vitamins and minerals that are kind of catalysts or helper nutrients that, some of your big hitters like calcium and phosphorus, if you don't have certain things in the right ratio and you don't have other things present that allow for their absorption and maximum efficiency in the critter, they get rid of it. And calcium and phosphorus are two of the main minerals that can actually be cataloged on a deer skeleton. And that was the other thing I found interesting in this study, that, deer, a lot of people think, well, it's July, whatever, the antlers are growing, now's the time to, let's throw out a block of mineral. One thing they're missing is that's really not your best time to be doing that. I mean, every little bit helps, but the majority of that antler that deer is going to grow, that's going to end up being solid in September, it begins being stored on the deer, on that buck skeleton, end of February, March, April, kind of in that time frame. You really can't nail down a specific week, obviously, but that's kind of the time frame of which, that gets deposited. And so after the rut, deer are exhausted, both bucks and does. They've used up their energy stores. They're starting to get ready for the wintertime, and they're, not only needing to recover fat storage wise, but from vitamin and mineral depletion that they had during that time period, needs to get them set up to go into to be healthy throughout the winter. And in some states that really don't have a whole lot of groceries and vegetation, that can be pretty tough for a deer. And likewise with today's combines, I mean, and this is the other thing Eric can vouch for. I grew up farming and ranching my whole life, and with my folks, and the combines back then, the cows could stay out on the field for a lot longer than they do now, because the combines left a lot more, and so these deer had a lot of carbohydrate stores laying around in the field. That's not so much today, and so we create a false carrying capacity with agriculture in a way where these deer have all this stuff to eat come midsummer on, and once harvest is over, that availability starts to really drop off. In fact, you start to creep into December and on, and in some areas, depending on what food sources these deer have, they can really start hurting. And you can tell it on your game camera pictures by the way the deer looks, if the ribs are starting to show and this and that. And so I kind of want to know, exactly what mineral, what vitamins, what all they need and what amounts they need and ratios and so on and so forth. And that's really the direction I hit it. And it was kind of crazy how stinking complicated it gets. Like, if you don't have this, then, well, this won't be absorbed and so on and so forth. And if you have too much of this, for example, magnesium and calcium, they've got to be kind of balanced, because if not, if you have potassium. If you get too much potassium, then that takes some of the magnesium away from their body. And so, some minerals you get too high and it adversely affects other minerals. And so it's not something that, a person wants to just go and necessarily throw together yourself. And I think a lot of times, what's kind of happened in the past is there's been a lot of stuff that's hit the market, and it's glorified cattle mineral or cattle whatever with a deer sticker slapped on it, and there's really no merit or research that goes into it. And, while, anything to a certain extent is better than nothing, I've, growing up would put mineral salt and mineral blocks out for the deer because it's better than nothing. But in the long run, it really needs to be tweaked and formulated for what deer need. They're a ruminant like a cow, but their ruminant is it's still a little bit different than what cattle are and their requirements for nutrition. And so, once I kind of had what I was looking for kind of formulated, the next thing I did was I began to search, like, okay, what do these other companies have? Because frankly, at that time, I had no intentions of doing anything business-wise. I just want to know if there's another, if somebody was making something for deer out there that had the formulation that was even, close to mine, I figured, what the heck, that's what I wanted, means I knew what I needed now. And the more I looked, the more I realized that it just, it really never began to, nothing jived. There were some good vitamin and mineral mixes. They lacked the protein. Some of them were decent vitamin and mineral mixes, but the ratios were off. Of course, you could always get protein about anywheres. The attractants, to get a deer attracted into stuff, that's kind of I don't want to say a science in its own, but, I've seen a lot of attractants on the market that you just as well put corn out because they'll come to that just as fast as they will anything else. And nobody really put everything in one bag. And I know now working with one of the marketing guys that we're working with, it's obviously you'd make a lot more money having people buy vitamins, having more, they got to buy the mineral, they got to buy the protein, they got to buy the attractant. And I wasn't really looking at it from a money aspect. I was looking at it from the average Joe like me that can't afford to go out and spend, $100 a bag on stuff if you really want to put everything in one bag. And so I started mixing my own stuff in a 5-gallon bucket, as crazy as that sounds. And, I did that for a year and a half or so. And finally, kind of the start of my mistakes getting us into this business was I showed people game camera pictures of, I know it sounds crazy because everybody's looking at antlers and racks and stuff like that, and I'm looking at overall herd health, because if you maximize a deer's herd health, you maximize their genetics, i.e. you maximize their antlers. So we noticed that the does, this is what really impressed me, come July on my control plot, like every good science project, you have to have a control. And what a control is a place that is left totally alone to nature, as if it was, no human help. No, you're not changing anything. And so I compared my control herd, so to speak, to my deer that I was supplementing. And I noticed a huge difference right away in the summer months. My does, you could see their ribs on my control. Where I was putting out, we didn't even have a name for it then. It was just the junk I was mixing up in a bucket. They looked super healthy. The ribs weren't sticking out. Their fawns looked extremely sleek. I mean, they looked awesome. And granted, this was just coming from this was just mixing out of a bucket. And there's not a lot of controls when you're mixing in a bucket as far as getting everything perfect every time from bucket to bucket.
Right.
And the more, I did it, I had people, mix me a bucket. And I finally got tired of mixing buckets for friends. And so, I went to Eric, and this was before we were actually partners. And I said, I need to get this stuff mixed. Can we do that? He's like, oh yeah, I can help you out with that. And again, we still had no intentions of anything business-wise. I couldn't find it on the market, so I knew I had to make it myself. So we started getting it bagged. Plain white bags, and basically what happened was I would come in to get a few bags, and come to find out the one time Eric called up and said, hey, we're out of this stuff. I'm like, what do you mean we're out of it? Well, people come in here, and we've mentioned to them, told them about it, and they bought it because they see what it's doing, what results you're getting. I'm like, well, all right, that's, at that time I'm still, to be honest with you, and I mentioned this the other day when we talked, you kind of feel like that mad scientist that's sitting there all hunched over your bucket of stuff, trying to protect it. Like I really didn't want anybody to have this. I didn't want anybody to know about it because I spent a lot of years looking into this. And I really didn't know that I wanted to do anything selling it wise, to be honest with you. And, one thing led to another, kind of got pushed by, family and friends. And the more we talked about it, actually the thing that kind of switched my mind was all the other hunters out there that are plain Joes just like us, they deserve to be able to also get the same thing we've got. Instead of paying, $30 or $40 for an attractant and a protein and another 20 or 30 for your mineral. And, by the time you start adding up stuff, you've got a lot of money in less than 50 pounds. And I wanted to make it as cheap as humanly possible, just so that, if we were going to do it, that was kind of my angle. And, we've been told by, people in the industry, boy, you guys should be, with what you got, everything in one bag, $45, $50 a bag is what you guys ought to be charging. And that's not going to happen, because that's really just not what I set out to do when I came up with this. I wanted the best bang for your buck, and no pun intended there.
Right.
And have the healthiest deer. Because for me, as a biology guy, I teach high school science, 7 through 12 science. I'm a professional taxidermist, and so I see a lot of antlers that come into my shop every year that are, they're lightweight. A lot of guys ask me, well, geez, I always got broke off tines. Why do I always get broke off tines? And a lot of that has to go with their nutritional availability. If they've got the proper nutrition, they're going to be more hard antlered, because they're not horns, they're antlers. They're more hard antlered, and they're going to withstand more intense fighting without breaking. And I can about pick out the places when they bring their heads in as to what type of nutrition they've got on their place. And sometimes it's naturally in the soil. I don't want to come off and say, the only way to go is you got to supplement everything, because that's, not everybody can afford to supplement year round. And so we work with people as far as certain times of the year when it's the best, time, for them. But that's kind of how it started in the research, and where it went from there, how we kind of got to this point, from really pretty innocent and humble beginnings with no intentions on really doing anything with it other than just creating something great for your deer and deer health. And if people are really interested in antlers and really healthy does, though a healthy animal starts at conception. A doe that has been given the proper nutrition, whether it's straight through nature, if you got it, whether it's supplementing, however you want to slice it. If you have a doe who's healthy when she conceives, and a buck who is healthy when he donates, so to speak, you have got the best, you've got the start of the best genetic potential for those deer. Not that supplementing is going to change their DNA. That's something that is genetic. You can't change their DNA. But what you do, though, is you maximize the health of that future fawn from the time you have two gametes, sperm and egg, to the point where they're during gestation, when you have a fawn developing inside the doe, those does that are consuming the proper nutrition are going to have the healthiest doe or buck fawns. Likewise, those doe and buck fawns are going to get a super head start to life versus ones that don't have it. And you will see that in your deer herd, down the road. I mean, bucks that have the proper nutrition from in vitro inside the mother all the way through their growing stages, you're going to, if you could take the same deer and do nothing with it, and take the same deer and have it proper nutrition from conception on, they're going to be able to maximize the genetics they have more efficiently when they've got the proper nutrition than when they don't. Gotcha. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. They think, well, if I just put a bag or two out of something here and there, I'm going to grow big bucks. Because, quite frankly, that's what we've been brainwashed into seeing. We see this on TV. Put this out, bigger bucks, blah, blah, blah. And it don't work that way. You can't grow a big buck or a healthy doe putting out a few little piles of this once or twice a year. It's a long-term commitment if you really want to have the best results. And you'll notice those best results, just talking about antler-wise. A buck isn't really fully, I shouldn't say even fully mature, but it's not until age 3.5 and beyond that you start seeing the genetic capability. Granted, you can see a 1.5-year-old buck that's got genetic potential, and that's not necessarily what I mean. What I'm saying is after 3.5 is when they really start to show their true colors of what you can maximize. And by giving them the proper nutrition, 3.5, 4.5 years later, you'll start to see the big time results of your labors of doing that. And once that process is started, it's just going to keep going from there if the person continues to give the deer the proper nutrition versus not.
Gotcha. Okay. Without giving away the farm here and without destroying the proprietary blend, what did you figure out as part of your studies that deer need in general as a good balance? Like, what I mean by that is between the minerals and the vitamins and the proteins, and you discuss this on your website. I want to get into kind of what these things mean. What did you decide were some of the more important elements of and maybe the things that were missing in other blends?
Well, to tell you the truth, there's, like I said, there's so many different blends out there, and there's a lot. I found there's a lot of people that they really don't have any biology background, and they're probably the most dangerous to their deer herd. Okay. That go out and they just blend their own, and they think if a little bit's good, more is better. And there's certain elements, certain minerals out there and trace minerals that in too high of concentrations. Let's take selenium, for example. Selenium is something it may be high in certain soils. You get out western Nebraska, Colorado, north and west and south of there, you'll have a little higher selenium in your soil. Around here, we've got it, but it's not in high concentrations. And so they think, well, if a little bit's good, more is better. And, you get something too high like selenium. The deer can develop sores, hair loss, cankers in their mouth. You can have a pretty sick looking deer. In fact, some of the studies I've read where, guys were given, outfitter type people were given the proper nutrition guidelines by someone, like here's what deer need. Didn't necessarily give them the exact amounts, but just said here's what they need, and almost killed one of his biggest producing bucks, kind of his stud buck, so to speak, on the place. And that actual story there's kind of been documented a few different places, if you snoop around the internet long enough. But obviously calcium and phosphorus are super important, and that's anybody that knows how to run the internet and Google will soon find that out, because there's a lot of information on out there what deer need.
Okay.
But there's not a lot of information on there that tells you, number one, what ratios everything need to be in, and number two, what catalyst vitamins, catalyst minerals need to be there to complement those specifically ratioed deals. And and the other thing too that I found was, even if there was a really good, a decent looking mineral on the market, we use a process called chelation for our vitamins and minerals. Basically anything that we can get chelated, we do it. And, there are some companies that have kind of looked into that and dabbled with it. But what chelation is when you put that nutrient in its most absorbable form. So, for example, coming from a human standpoint, so we can all understand this. If you take, for example, and I'm not going to name any human vitamins because I don't want to either promote or not promote anybody, but if you go to a store and buy a certain supplement and take it, you'll probably pee out the majority of it because none of it's chelated. Whereas your better, higher quality nutrition for people is chelated. Your body's going to absorb a higher percentage of it. It's going to pass less of it. And so that was one of the other big sticklers I was looking at is, you have to have chelation if you want to. I shouldn't say you have to, but it's a good idea to have them chelated so that the deer will absorb the maximum amount of nutritional value from what you're putting out.
So in your formula, it involves chelated vitamins. It involves minerals of some capacity in a proper amount that you feel is necessary for the deer. Protein. Why protein?
Well, protein, And again, I don't want to always keep going to the bucks, and I'll always refer back to the does. I know that's what's on pretty much everybody's mind nowadays, because you watch TV and, I don't know if the ratings are based off the racks or not, but it's, it ultimately it kind of comes back to, what kind of antlers can I grow? But an antler, depending on what core sample you pull, you can be anywhere from 30 to 40% protein at different times of the growing cycle. In fact, when they're really heavily growing, that antler may be up to 80% protein matrix. So if you imagine construction work, for example, and you look outside of you look on the outside of a building that's being built, and there's a scaffolding going up.
Yep.
Proteins like that scaffolding matrix. Protein combines with other collagen, which collagen is like the fibrous tissue that makes up your, in your joints and your ligaments and cartilage like that's in your ear and your nose. And the protein combines with that to make this scaffolding, so to speak, that grows the, what the antler is going to look like. And then comes along your workers, your minerals. As that antler is being built by protein, you've got, if you can just imagine these little people smearing on the cement onto that matrix, that scaffolding, solidifying that antler. And, antlers usually get hard-horned sometime end of August, first part of September, and it can vary depending on your elevation, south to north, right?
Yep. So
you got to have the protein to build the antlers, the antler matrix, and if all you do is feed protein, like I've seen, I got a few different customers in my taxidermy shop this year, in fact, that I pretty much guessed what they were using for a feed, because it was all protein, and they had a nice, decent-sized rack and had good characters and everything, but it was super lightweight, and you could just feel it. It just did not have the integrity that a good antler does. And the another way you can also tell if a deer is not getting proper nutrition for that antler, they'll have a hard time shedding their velvet. If you kill a buck that's got velvet still stuck all over it and it's hardened and dried on there,
yep,
and that antler is lightweight, what that antler was doing is crying out. It's like, hey, we're not done growing here yet, and the body's going too late. Photoperiodism has kicked in. Daylight hours are getting short. We're cutting off blood supply. We're done. And so you have to have that protein to build your matrix. You got to have the vitamins there to help to act as catalysts with, the growth and development. And then you have to have those minerals to come along to cement in, so to speak, and create to solidify that antler and give it the integrity that, it's going to need. Likewise on your does, if you don't have the protein for your does, everything from, muscling, their muscles, milking, their hair, their coat for the winter, their skin integrity, so much is involved with protein. And so, it's important that they get it. Although, does need a little bit different percentages of protein. Growing younger bucks need a little bit differences in percentages of protein than other deer. And, what I really tried doing was you have to find a really happy medium to satisfy both spectrum of deer, what their nutritional value is. Same with the vitamins and minerals. For example, another element that they need, sodium. Does actually need a lot more sodium than bucks do. And they think that has to do with their, reproductive cycle. But sodium is also it's a carrier mineral, a carrier element that, it has a number of uses that fluid retention, muscle contraction, the sodium potassium ion pumps. And I don't want to get all scientific and in depth, but, nerves don't fire without sodium and potassium. And so, if the does don't have this proper nutrition and they're not healthy, in some areas where they're low in nutritional value, they'll actually abort fawns because the body naturally says, hey, we can't afford to grow a fawn or us ourselves is going to die, and so they can abort. Now, granted, that's in areas where you really have to have low nutritional value, desert or, more dry, arid areas. Sometimes places that are super wet, you'd think, geez, look at all this vegetation. We get all this rain. Well, the more rain you get, and this is something Eric can also vouch for, is sometimes also the more washed out your soils get, and so therefore your forage does not have near the nutritional value in it than an area that's more semi-arid or arid. I'm not talking desert, obviously, but so weather plays a huge factor in it all also. But
that's a good point. I was going to ask. So I wanted to see this is a supplement, and is it possible through Eric's work to make sure that nutrition is there such that the supplements aren't as needed? And maybe Eric can.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that, we've, the average, I'm just going to go buy a bag person. Mm-hmm. Our normal product, our normal Rackology is designed to really, it's kind of the best of both worlds, a good overall. But when we run into, a lot of our customers that are really serious, they're putting our stuff out year round, or even just throughout the winter months. Like I said, from that December through August is so critical. And, those deer are taking that's the other thing I forgot to mention. Deer, when a buck's growing his antlers, they're not growing it from what they're eating. A buck grows his antlers from what he put on in those, February, March, April, and takes it from his skeleton and deposits it, cements it onto his antler come spring when they start growing the antlers. And then that mineral and those nutrients need to be replaced over the summer months back onto their skeleton. And if there ever gets a point where the body says, we can't afford to shell out any more mineral, antler cementation, ceases. And so when you look at soil wise, getting back to the soil sampling, Eric can look at a lot of the soil samples and kind of see what they're, and not even just the soil samples, but actually plant forage samples, and look at the plant and see what type of nutritional value is in that plant. And then we can really base a true all-around feeding program for nutritional supplementing program for their deer. You might find an area that their forage is really high in a lot of nutrients, and we can say, well, you may not need to supplement as heavy, and you might be able to get by more with your food plots. And so, again, if we were in this just to make a ton of money, we just want to push the supplement year round and everything else. And we really want to do the most efficient, justice for our customers is what we possibly can. We're not here selling snake oil, and we're not here to make a ton of money on somebody. We really want to make sure that, they're using what they need to use, but there's no sense in overdoing it, because all they're going to do is pee it out anyway. So
right. Gotcha. So it's possible that the nutrition could be there in the growing months, but in times like the middle of the winter, pre-spring, when there's not a lot to forage on, it's kind of hard for them to get those nutrients into their body. So if they're taking it from their skeleton, if they don't have those additional supplements available to them at that time, then the antler growth may not be as prominent as it could.
Yeah, the antler growth won't be as prominent, and their skeleton will suffer too, because they're pulling those nutrients out just for cellular functions, like sodium and potassium, just for nerve function. And they're going through a lot of energy just to stay warm.
Right.
Calories are calories, and if they're not consuming the calories, it's coming off of the fat stores. And once the fat stores are done, the next thing that they start, the body starts feeding on is the muscle. And that's why you see deer come into the spring in some areas that maybe don't have the good nutrition. And, the deer look like half the deer they were in the fall. And it's just crazy. The other thing is that's not healthy for your deer. I equate that to, back before they had a lot more regulations with wrestling, with wrestlers. Geez, some of these guys would have a help coach football, and would go into football, and big strapping young men, and by the time wrestling was done, they looked like skeletons and looked like they were losing muscle. And every year they had to rebuild that, and it's not good for the body to go through those swings.
Right. And
so, in areas that need it, if you're serious about your deer, that's what you do, is prevent the drastic swings. Doesn't mean, because we work with a lot of guys that they'll come in and say, well, I got X amount of dollars to spend. When is the best time, and what do I need to do with this amount of money? And we'll do everything we possibly can to make sure that they get the most out of their money.
Gotcha. So there's one other word that I really want to cover here, and this is, you talk about it on the website, it's some kind of a stress relief compound for wild ruminant gut microbes is how you describe it. And it's yucca something. I'm going to let you pronounce the rest of it. What does that mean, and why is that important?
Well, the yucca shitagera is kind of sounds like a cuss word, so don't bleep that out.
Right.
It's a well-known additive. Originally had its debut obviously in the cattle industry, but they found, and in humans, and they found just what it can do as far as the good ruminant bacteria, helping them with efficiency and absorption, helping to prevent bad bugs, as we'll call them, microbes, that the deer can pick up in nature. So just an overall health additive besides absorption. And another thing it does too is if your deer accidentally gets into a pile of corn or something like that. I mean, cattle, for the people that don't live around a cattle growing area, if cattle get into too much corn, like any ruminant, they'll founder. And it's because they get too much niacin. And I'm not going to go into the whole stuff about that, but this prevents that niacin uptake from foundering these critters. And so, and there's a lot more nutritional value to it than that gets a little deeper, but it's just a huge additive that we've incorporated. And, like all good science, I made sure that, some products on the market do have that. Although ratios, again, I can't stress enough, is what it boils down to. Is somebody could say, well, we got this in our product and we got that in our product and we got 100% of this in our product. Well, if it's not at the right ratio, it's either not doing as good a job as it can, or it's actually causing, stuff to go backwards, so to speak. And so kind of the gist on that.
That's cool. And, so what I'm hearing here is that two smart guys, that one being a biologist and the other being an agronomist, and the biologist, and I'm just kind of re-summarizing who you guys are. The biologist studied in college on his way to his master's deer and started investigating even further what deer nutrition is all about. On the other side of that, the agronomist is out there trying and has a degree learning what the soils need in order to grow. Those very things that deer need throughout the year, and together you guys somehow you guys got together. I don't know. This is just the way the world works sometimes. There's a force amongst us. Brought you two together to make a very well planned, very well thought out formula that is a supplement for deer. And I think that I don't hear that often. A lot of times it's just, hey, let's sell some stuff. And I feel like you thought it out way before you even decided to sell the stuff, which is important to me to hear you guys say this. So I'm job well done. I think it's just a really interesting story. And I got to ask, how did you guys meet in the first place?
Well, if you don't, we met. I don't know. We ran into each other and hung out a lot. Here around Loop City long before we ever got into business. Together. I think things really started jiving when I came in and was discussing with him about, the formulation and about getting it bagged. And, of course he could help me with that. And, when the business kind of started presenting itself more to us, kind of getting hinted towards us is kind of when, we both looked at each other and was like, wow, to tell you the truth, I mean, Eric is a really good guy. He, I don't know that he really expected anything in the beginning out of it at all. I mean, we started talking business together. I mean, I don't know what his thoughts were, but he didn't act like it really mattered to him what percent of the business it was and what wasn't. And he's like, well, you came up with this. He goes, I don't care. It's up to you, whatever you want to do. And I'm thinking, I knew as an agronomist what he could bring to the table for me, for us. And, frankly, I think I'd have been crazy not to have him as a partner because of that. And the other thing is just, a good friend. He's honest, trustworthy. And that's something that, that's what I expect because that's how I am. And so I felt like it was just something that, we didn't force. It just somehow came naturally. Like literally I can sit back now and look back and go, man, really, how did we how did we just decide to get together? It just kind of morphed.
I think it's a lot about what we're doing right now. Jason and I, if you haven't gathered, like the gift of gab and talking and BSing, and we like to drink beer, and we're good old boys as well. And I think the first time I met Jason, really looking back on it, we'd seen each other. I knew he was from town. I knew his younger brother. I knew his parents because they both farmed, and I dealt with farmers when I moved up here. And I got a nice deer and my bow, and I kept seeing a sign up there. I'm like, yeah, Jason is a taxidermist. I'm going to go in there. And
that's right. I
figured, well, I wonder what he's going to sock me for a deer mount. And I went in there expecting this could be this much. And we just hit it off. Just kind of talked about deer hunting. Talked about just kind of got to know each other, and we just kind of BS then, and we'd seen each other, and so from that day on, and I knew what kind of type of guy he was, and honest, he wasn't going to rake me over the coals on a deer mount, and I saw his work, and if you guys haven't seen his work, I'll put him up against any taxidermist on this planet. Attention to detail, and that's one thing when I walk into his studio, I'm like, that's what I want my deer to look like, just like that. And knowing that he had that attention to detail, and and him and I think a lot alike. There's a lot of sleepless nights that I think about stuff, and whether it be agronomy, or especially since this has started, on what direction we can go, and we both are on the same wavelength, I think, and we're both professional, and when we started doing this, and when Jason, like you said, he came in and said, hey, well, what do you do? Do you think we should start selling this? What do you think? And I wasn't expecting much. We both have families, and we both have full-time jobs, and it's a labor of love. And seeing the promise of this, and having the, I guess, just the passion for hunting and passion for helping people, whether it be agronomy or deer, or whether it be a taxidermy deal, or Jason in school with kids. It's a passion helping people, and that's how it started. And we both got, without talk, we just basically on the same wavelength, saying, okay, this is what we want to do. We're going for it, and we really believe in it. I mean, if it was something that we didn't believe in, trust me, we wouldn't be here. We could just throw some stuff in a bag and call it deer food and be good with it. But when he came to it and said, this is, and I saw the reason behind it, and bringing in the cattle side, bringing in the feed side, and the agronomy side, just kind of completed that circle that, 365 days a year, we could help people out. And that's, I guess, kind of how this all kind of started, and just a labor of love, and that's what it's going to continue to be. So,
gotcha. Very, very good story. Love it, man. I love what you guys are doing. It's a fascinating compilation of something that obviously all four of us that are on this or in this conversation care about, and it's the health of the deer herd around where you are, and you can tell you guys have the same passion that we do. That's very, very cool. Well, I asked both of you guys to think of a memorable deer hunt that you've gone on, and one that sticks out in your head. And I'd like to hear the story play by play, break it down into kind of slow motion, so we can get a real good understanding and visual as we hear the story. Let's start with Jason. Jason, where are we going to go?
We're going to go back to first year I went bow hunting. I think I was probably 14-ish, I'm guessing. That was back before there really was such thing as camo as we know it today, and pretty much wore a gray hooded sweatshirt and actually blue jeans this evening, sitting in the tree stand with my mom. She's taken me everywhere hunting since I was a kid, checking traps before I could drive and all that. So here she is. She got her leg, she's up wrapped around a tree limb, because that was back before there really were tree stands. Also, we built our own, and I sat in a little bit bigger spot, and she was on a little slot of wood, basically. And to start the evening off early on, this is like in September, had a raccoon come and try to crawl across the limb with her, and she normally would have flipped out because she knew I would have got upset if she would have made noise. She just kind of gritted her teeth and kind of kicked at the coon a little bit until it basically it went out clear out on this cottonwood limb and just sat there the rest of the night, and she actually hung on. And it was about probably 20 minutes later, a doe came through, and growing up, learning to hunt from my granddad and stuff like that, you do what you do what you're told. So this doe finally walks by, and I wasn't picky. I was using one of the original Bear compound bows. I didn't have any sights. I had a flipper rest and aluminum arrows and shooting with fingers. And instinct shot. And about the time I took the shot at her, she was probably a little bit further underneath me than I would take a shot nowadays. But, I was 14 and just starting out, and hit her a little high and spined her, and she dropped right there. And I thought, well, that's it. Got to wait 30 minutes is what they tell me. So I waited 30 minutes, and the kind of the gruesome part I feel bad about is the dose. Obviously she was still alive. And, 30 minutes, instead of putting another arrow in her, obviously at 30 minutes, we got down and went over to her. Well, she gets up and takes off running. And this is where my grown up cowboy style came in. I actually, I couldn't get a shot at her running, and she wasn't going very fast. So I did a stupid thing. I ran up beside her and steer dogged her and got the one leg up in the air and had her down just like we would one of our calves before branding, and waited for my mom to, come running up there. And she was upset because instead of hollering at her saying, "Hey, I got the doe down," I'm going, "Mom, I got the doe." You got to be all quiet, right? Even though you just raised hell or heck. Right. And, and she comes up and she's bawling because she thought I fell on an arrow, or it's kind of crazy times, but it's something that I'll absolutely never forget, that first doe. And it's something that I also learned from that, that was a point at which I really seen and took note of, us as hunters, how, there's always these war stories you hear that kind of make you cringe, and it makes you realize that us as hunters need to do the most, take care of that animal in the most humane and fastest way possible. And that's probably one of the other reasons why that stuck with me so long, was it really bothered me. And I think it should bother everybody if that happens, is, making the most quickest humane harvest as possible. But it was definitely one of those memories I'll never forget, doing that. I'm lucky I didn't get kicked, or who knows what could have happened to me. It was pretty stupid, actually.
It worked out. Yeah, it's a very interesting way to take a whitetail. Going back to your roots there, I guess, as a predator, a true predator, and you hog-tied a whitetail. Wow, that's a good one. All right, Eric, where are we going to go with you?
Oh, well, I guess I've had a lot of memorable ones. Trying to pick one out's tough. Hunting turkeys with the kids is always memorable and fun. And the one, I guess, that always, like what Jason says, kind of sticks with me is, it wasn't a big deal. It was me and my dad and my dad's best friend, who's passed away now. And I guess that's why I always remember this. And lo and behold, I was from Kearney. Never thought in a million years I'd be up here in Loop City. We played basketball and football against them. But my dad's best friend said, "Hey, we got some ground up by Loop City, Litchfield area that we can go deer hunt on." All right. And I said, well, I'm tagging along. And at the time, I was probably 16, and it was the second year I picked up a bow. And I basically, I grabbed it, and my dad never bow hunted. And he looked at me with the strangest look, and he just kind of like that smile that the dad gives you, like, "Good luck, buddy. You might as well just go ahead and take a knife and throw it at him, And so I grabbed it. He grabbed his muzzle loader, and he always loved a muzzle load. And his best friend grabbed the muzzle loader as well and came up here. And when I thought of a place to hunt, I thought of a nice wooded area. We'll sit for a while. Maybe they'll walk, and I'll sit up in a tree. Maybe I'll sit on the ground and, blind myself in somehow. We get up here to Loop City, and if you visualize the sand hills, and we're right on the foothills of the sand hills, I call it. Not a lot of trees. I'm looking at it going, where in the heck are we going to hunt? And the landowner at the time, the friend of my dad's friend, said, "Oh, just go hunt that pasture." And they're like, "All right, we'll go." I'm like, "You guys can shoot out there 100 yards. I'm going to have " But anyway, I said, "Well, I'm going to go down these two draws. I'm going to say, you guys can hunt however you want to hunt." And well, I got there. They drank the rest of their coffee, and I got out about a half hour before them, sat down, and they must have bumped a couple going in on a couple other grass draws. Had 3 white-tailed does coming right at me, and one stopped right at about 20 yards. I kind of stepped off a few things when I sat down, and I thought she was at 20, and pulled the old Golden Eagle Evolution bow, first compound bow I shot, and pulled it back and let the arrow go, and couldn't tell. It was a cold December day, and where you could, I can't believe she couldn't see my breath sitting there because she's only 20 yards away. I was breathing so hard, not knowing what I was going to do, and so I couldn't even tell. After I shot, I exhaled. It just basically, and I wear contacts at the time. I was wearing glasses and couldn't see anything. I'm like, I don't know if I even hit her. 2 seconds later, I kind of look up the hill, and I could see her she was trying to make the hill, and then all of a sudden she just fell over sideways, started rolling back down. Awesome. I felt it was such an awesome feeling. So I'm like, well, I'm going to go ahead and field dress her. I dressed her out, waited and waited and waited. And finally my dad and his buddy showed up. They both looked at me and were like, you got to be kidding me. They didn't even get a shot at anything. And I'm like, well, I guess when you sit down somewhere, they come at you and you walk to them. You don't have deer see you before they see you, before you see them a lot. But anyway, I kind of bantered back and forth with my dad, and he goes, well, haul her back into the truck. And needless to say, we walked in about 2.5 miles. And they were going to hunt 2 more draws. And I'm like, so I'm dragging this doe, back feet first. It wasn't working. I mean, I was going through these pastures up and down these hills. I mean, it's like a lot of friction there. I couldn't pull her. I mean, I was trying to walk these snowy hills, and I couldn't make it. I'm like, okay, well, I'll try to drag her from her ears, go with the grain of her hair.
Right.
Tried doing that. Kept slipping and getting so mad. I'm like, well, I'll just put her over my shoulders. So I lifted, I dressed her out all right, put her over my shoulders, walked all the way back to the pickup, started getting warm out. Even as cold as it was, I was sweating, threw in the back of the tailgate, and I just had to sit there on the tailgate for a while to catch my breath. And all of a sudden I hear this truck come by me, and it stops, and I didn't really pay much attention, just waved, and they backed up, and they said, hey, son, are you all right? And I said, well, yeah, because I'm just kind of lurched over on the tailgate trying to catch my breath.
Yeah.
And they look at me, I said, you okay? And I said, yeah, fine. Why? Are you hurt? And I said, no, I'm not hurt. And finally, it dawned on me when I carried that doe all the way back, I had blood down my back,
right,
down my shoulders from that doe. They seriously thought I got ran over and I was sitting on the tailgate. And for the longest time, I was like, what in the heck are they asking me if I'm all right? And so they took off, and I looked at my old overalls, and it looked like somebody shot me. And so all that blood from that doe. So I set her in the tailgate and never forgot that. And to this day, if I could find out who stopped in this Loop City area and asked me if I was all right, I'd go treat him to a case of beer and a nice lunch somewhere. But yeah, I had no idea who that was. But
funny thing is Eric is one of the few people that I know that could just sling a big doe over his shoulder. Because until you see us in person, it's like, that movie Twins?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Danny DeVito, the little dude, and Eric. The big guy.
Gotcha.
Sounds familiar.
Oh, that's funny stuff. That was two great deer stories. I enjoyed those. Dusty, you want to hit the 10 rapid fire questions?
Yeah, and we'll start. We'll go one at a time. Eric, if you want to answer first, then we'll slide right into Jason's answer. We did not prep you for these, so best hunting tip.
Best hunting tip: patience. Patience.
Well, as he took mine, but I was going to say, watch your wind.
Good answers.
Especially when you're behind Jason.
Fun guy.
Eric, one thing that you cannot hunt without, other than your firearm and your bow.
One thing I can't hunt without. Probably a good set of long johns. I might be big, but I get cold fast.
Jason.
For me, I'm kind of a pocket guy, so I'd say I got to have a pack with, everything that I probably don't need in it.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Yep.
What's your biggest pet peeve, Eric?
My biggest pet peeve is one-uppers. When you talk to hunting guys, if you do something, they've always done it better, or this is the way you got to do it.
Yeah,
Jason.
I'm
glad you let me go first.
Yeah, that's not fair. I suppose my other big pet peeve is, it kind of goes along the same lines as the one-uppers, but it's when, and we're all guilty of it, but sitting there going, well, if the antlers were this way, or if the rack was a little bit wider or whatever, and I listen to people talk that way, and we just kind of need to be happy with what we got. But like I said, we're all guilty of doing it, but at the same time, it's kind of a pet peeve of mine, on the deer side of things.
Yeah, for sure. Eric, how old are you?
What's that?
How old are you?
Oh, my hearing's going bad. I'm almost 40. 39.
39. What would the 39-year-old Eric, knowing what you know today, tell the 20-year-old Eric?
Take care of your knees and back. My knees.
Jason,
jumping off trucks, wrecking four-wheelers, jumping over fences. Take care of knees.
For me, it would definitely be something I found out, obviously later on in life, and that was to work smarter and not harder. I really went through the life of school knock, so I would tell myself that if I could go back.
Gotcha. Eric, you meet a stranger at a trade show in the lobby or in the elevator. They ask, what do you do for a living? What do you say?
Well, I would say that I raise my family the best I can, and try to help people every chance I can, no matter what it would be, I guess.
Gotcha.
When I say agronomy, they don't know what it means anyway, so I can't do that.
Right.
Jason, you meet a stranger.
Usually when I go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just say, somebody runs into me, they ask me what I do right now. Obviously, I'm a high school science teacher and a professional taxidermist.
Gotcha.
So
I'm going to switch it up. Jason, what'd you have for breakfast this morning?
Oh, I had a Jimmy Dean sausage egg McMuffin type deal.
Eric.
You took mine. That's no fair. No. I was on my way to soil sample, and I had something similar. I had the old gas station choke and puke breakfast sandwich.
Nice.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Nice. At least it wasn't a roller dog.
Yeah. I looked pretty hard at one, but it takes quite a bit.
All right. Jason, you get your own billboard, blank canvas. What does it say? What would you put on it? Anything you can put on a blank canvas billboard.
For this business, you mean?
Anything, it doesn't matter. Business, whatever. You get a blank canvas billboard on the side of the road. What would you put on it?
Boy, I tell you, obviously going with this business, kind of the catchphrase I always use was everything in one bag. But, that's a tough one there's a lot of things I'd want to put on it, I guess. I don't know. But that was like the first thing that came to my mind just because of thinking of, what we're doing.
All right. Eric, what would you put on a blank canvas billboard on the side of the road?
I would probably put, is your refrigerator running?
Go catch it.
Makes people think, I guess.
Eric, I say the word successful. Who's the first person that pops in your mind and why?
Firstborn, toss up between my mom and dad. They raised me well and got by with what they had, and they're the reason I'm where I'm at now.
Jason.
My granddad's the first person I think of when I think of successful, because it's basically it's his shoes and his footsteps that I think I tried. At first I just didn't think there's any way I could ever fill them, and that's kind of why I think at some point I gave up a little bit, and then I finally realized things that he had told me, and really my wife is what she's the one that really pushed me into being the success I am today with the college and everything. But my granddad's I always looked up to him like no other. Not even funny.
Gotcha. Very good. Jason, what's a day in your life look like?
Yeah. Well, it depends on the day of the week. If it's during the school year, it's putting up with being blessed with a class full.
I like how you changed that.
Putting up with being blessed by a class full of students that hopefully putting out people that can make educated decisions, not ones that somebody else told them to do. And if it's on a weekend or over the summer, why, who knows what I'm doing in my taxidermy shop or hunting. My wife has even often told me I need to trim some things out of my life. I kind of burn my candles at 2 or 3 ends.
Right. Eric.
Usually it's a blur from sun up to sundown some days, but today I was blessed to be out on a gorgeous day and on a 4-wheeler grid soil sampling 2 pivots over in eastern Nebraska, and got back, unloaded everything, and made a few soil or fertilizer recommendations, emailed those out, and turned around and did some work here at the shop. And then Jason showed up, and here we are.
Gotcha. Jason, what's a hunting day in your life look like?
Well, whether I'm getting off out of school and running home and getting my gear, or if it's a weekend, I'm getting my gear. A hunting kind of trip for me, average, looks like sitting in the tree stand, taking a lot of deep breaths and smelling the air, and just really appreciating the fact that I'm sitting in a tree stand, and try to actually. That's kind of my place where I unwind and go to my happy place, so to speak. So that's what that looks like, is just relaxation. It's, if I get something, bonus. If I don't, well, just there's really not a lot of words can describe the feelings of just sitting there enjoying nature and appreciating it.
Very cool. Eric, what's yours look like?
Well, mine's changed in the last about 9 years, I guess, but my typical day, or not typical, but what I envision is my 2 oldest kids, 9 years old, Olivia, and 6-year-old Isaac. Elliot's not old enough yet really to go out yet, but go out, get in the pop-up blind, and answer 1,000 questions from my 6-year-old on why is a turkey so noisy and why is this and that. It's answering those questions and trying to be quiet at the same time and teaching things while I'm out there and spending time with them. And then, like Jason said, we're not successful. It's still fun. They think every hunt is an adventure and fun. And that's what I envision from here on out, because I think it's going to be more and more because they've got the bug now, and I can't have my own therapy anymore because if they know I'm going, they're going with me.
That's just kind of spinning off of that, because now it makes me kind of feel bad, because that's
good.
Really,
I was trying to do that.
That's really he really summed it up. Also for me, that's even a better one, because I think of my daughter. In fact, just kind of a crazy quick one here. 2 years ago, she was with me in the pop-up blind, better than about any other hunting partner that I've ever sat with, and shot an awesome 6.5-year-old buck. And for a 9-year-old, well, at the time, 7.5-year-old girl, she bugged me for about 8 months because she wanted that deer to get mounted, and it needed to hang into her room. And to this day, every night when I tuck her in and say the prayers and so forth, that deer is hanging on her wall.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
Very good, guys. That wraps up the 10 rapid-fire questions. Great answers.
Very, very cool. All right, guys, so tell us where we can find you when you're not in the studios here with us, and how we can learn more about Rackology.
Well, the best place right now to kind of learn and about us and where things are kind of written down a little more is our website, which is rackology.org, and it's got pretty much a little bit of bio about us and some of our research or why we think things are important. Also on about any social media. I'm kind of the Facebook guy. Jason is definitely the Twitter guy. Instagram, but we do have a Twitter handle as well. But on Facebook is our main one, and that's just Rackology on Facebook.
Okay.
And Jason's
Rackology LLC on Instagram.
Yep.
Gotcha. And let's say somebody's listening to this show and they want to try to buy some of your formula. Where can they get it?
Well, they right now, as all businesses in the early stages, we've got our main 50-pound bag available on the website. Although shipping is kind of what kind of kills things. But we've got a dealer tab on there. You can click on and see how close you are to the nearest dealer. Worst case scenario or whatever, we just have to ship it to you. That's also why we're really looking for dealers in all these other states, because when we've ran our commercials, I mean, we've gotten calls and emails from everywhere,
right? Which
is great. So it's kind of like everybody's waiting for dealers to be placed in these other states. So it's a good problem to have.
Yep.
So right now we've done a lot of just shipping the bags to individuals. A lot of our people that are serious about their deer. Obviously they're ordering it by the half ton or ton, and that definitely makes it a lot cheaper on shipping than trying to just ship one bag.
Right.
But so that and our food plot stuff and our fertilizer, that's right now we're in the makings of getting the bags trimmed down, and hopefully here within the month we finally got something out on the website with those as well.
Gotcha. Very, very good, guys. This has been enlightening. I have to say, I've learned a lot speaking with you, and I mean, I didn't even know really what an agronomist was until you explained it to me. But I've learned all kinds of stuff listening to the show, and I guarantee you, some of the listeners will also be almost overwhelmed with the amount of information. So I got to say, I think we have to have you guys back. I'm excited about having you guys as frequent contributors to future shows, because I don't feel like we've really done anything but touched on the surface of some of the things that are available out there, or the things we should be thinking about for deer nutrition and our deer herd around us that we're trying to keep healthy. So I appreciate your time and your honesty and your candor, and it's really a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us, and we look forward to a good, long-standing relationship. This was awesome.
I thought we had a lot of information with Barry Wenzel from last week's show, but this show is as comprehensive as that show with Barry. It's unbelievable how much content we're digging into here in the last couple of weeks.
That's what we're shooting for, Jay. Is more information to get in the hunter's lap and be able to utilize and make a better year for themselves.
That's what we do here. We go and get the best and brightest from across the country and break it all down bit by bit, digest every little thing that particular hunter or scientist or whoever it is that's contributing to the whitetail woods. We could get them on the show and we break it down and find out what they're doing so you can do it too. Dusty, do we have a Chubby Tines tip of the week this week?
No, as always, Jay. We've always got a Chubby Tines tip of the week.
Cool. The Chubby Tines tip of the week is sponsored by Morse's Sporting Goods. Firearms, used firearms, bows, used bows, located at 85 Kentucky Falls Road in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. Give Jim a call at 603-464-3444, morsessportinggoods.com. Your dollars go further in New Hampshire. There's no sales tax. Morse's Sporting Goods.
We'll get into a little bit about being able to read your property a little bit, and that goes into not only the layout, the visual points, and that's something that I'm focusing on today is being able to walk through the woods and visually see where a deer may be coming up a trail and skylighting you in a tree. And what I mean by that is the deer, when they're walking uphill, they're going to naturally look up the hill and what's in front of them. Now, if you set a tree stand on a hillside, the deer are walking towards you, and they're what's called skylighting you. They're able to see you up in that tree almost like you're setting on the ground. Does that make sense to you?
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Couple ridges that the deer are coming across. You know, when them deer walk up that ridge, they may be looking up at you, and you may look like you're 6 feet off the ground of them. In reality, you're 15, 20 foot in the tree. But as they're coming up that hill, the layout of the land, it gives them that visual to be able to see you at a 6 to 8 foot vision level. So you need to consider that. And that's what I get into about knowing the layout of the land. And right now is perfect time to go walk. And if you're thinking about setting a tree stand up on a hillside and you got a major deer corridor coming at you, go down that trail, turn around, walk back and look around and see what's out there. See what the deer is going to see from where they're coming from, and be able to pick out your tree stand location. And that's something that, you know, many, many years ago, I learned that I set a stand, deer coming down the trail, they look up, and I'm like, man, they're seeing me. Look at them. They turn around walking away. Wouldn't make a sound, wouldn't blow, wouldn't nothing. They just turn around and walk away. Well, what was happening is that deer was walking up that trail. As soon as they get about halfway up that knoll, in his vision, deer, buck, doesn't matter, yearling, in their vision, they were seeing me where I looked like I was 8 foot off the ground, even though I was 15 foot in the air.
Right.
But when, you know, the layout of the land was allowing them to skylight me.
Right. That's
something that, you know, right now, walk around and look where your tree stand is located. If you had a problem that the deer wouldn't commit to that trail and they would just bump off of it, turn around, walk away, walk in another direction, it always happened, and you're like, man, I don't know what's going on. You know, go back and replay what happened this year. Look at your stand from different directions, and I tell you what, it'll educate you a lot about what them deer are seeing.
So what did you do? Did you end up moving your stand in that scenario?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to go take that walk, look around, and get where the deer have the least amount of visual on you.
Okay. All right. So stand movement instead of. Have you ever considered putting like some kind of a backdrop to the backside of your stand? Is that effective, or is it better to move the stand?
I'd say move the stand, because you get up there and you put a backdrop, you try to, you know, incorporate some limbs into your tree stand, make it kind of break up your silhouette, and then you're creating that blob that they recognize that it's not normal.
Okay, gotcha. Very good. Very nice, man. Very, very nice. So, Dusty, where can we find you when you're not hanging out in the studio with me?
Shoot me an email, dusty@bigbuckregistry.com, and I promise you I'll get back to you on emails, and try to answer all and every email that we receive, and I know you're the same way, Jay. But if you can't reach me an email, look me up, Chubby Tines Outdoors on Facebook, @Chasing Antler on Instagram and Twitter. Jay, where can the people reach out to you when you're not on the mic?
Best place, like you said, Jay, at bigbuckregistry.com. That's my email address, and I answer all emails. It might take me a day sometimes if we're getting inundated, but I will get back to you. You can always give us a call at 724-613-2825. That's our hotline. Leave us anything there. I don't care what it is. like the show, don't like the show, have a good deer story, have a suggestion, whatever you want to do, just leave us a message there. You can always find us on Facebook, facebook.com/Big Buck Registry. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. You can listen to the show in various formats. You can listen to us on iTunes. You can listen to us on iHeartRadio and on YouTube as well. So all of our audio gets converted to a full-length video that you can listen to on YouTube if you're a YouTube fan. We're also on Blueberry, and I think that's pretty much it, man. That's all the places there are. Big buck everywhere, a big buck.
I'm Dusty Phillips.
I'm Jay Scott, and this is the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Can't wait.